Okay, got a notification?
Got a notification. Let me just see. How do you open the text part now?
Yeah, is there anything that says Youri's recording the call?
No, I don't see anything anywhere.
Okay, well, I think, okay, well, actually then...
Well, it says recording, and there's a button here to say to stop recording. So I'm not going to touch that.
Okay, then, all right, then I think we're good to go then. All right, let's get started then. Okay, hello everyone, welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenience, truth telling and myth busting. And we are joined by Palestinian Canadian Laith Marouf, who's a long time, of course, he's a long time Palestinian activist, trying to, of course, end the brutal occupation of his of his country from the Israeli apartheid regime, and he's also been a long time anti-racism activist in Canada, anti-Islamophobic activist in Canada, anti-Arab, anti-Middle Eastern activist in Canada. And we're going to be talking about that, but we're also going to be talking about a ridiculous fake outrage campaign, cancel culture campaign that's been launched against him for the past several months. But before we get into that, first of all, Laith, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a real honor to have you on. And just before we talk a little bit about your background and why the far and the far right's obsession with you, you are in Lebanon right now. So I have to ask, how is Lebanon right now? How are how is the country in its efforts to try to rebuild itself after the port blast? And so please tell us. I'm curious if there's any improvements on that front.
Well, right now they are trying to elect a new president and a new prime minister because the terms of both ended, and so we're in this constitutional, deadline period where all the political parties have to come together, and this coincided, of course, with the signing, which didn't get signed yet. It's going to be signed this week, of a deal with the Zionist occupation on demarking the international waters of both Lebanon and occupied Palestine because of the dispute over gas and oil fields in the Mediterranean. Now, some of your viewers may know that in the last few months there was threats by Hezbollah, the main resistance party here in Lebanon, to sink all the gas and oil field installations in the Eastern Mediterranean controlled by the Zionist colony if Lebanon did not get its right to its territorial waters and to extraction also in Lebanon, because there has been contracts on record for the last 10 years signed with Total, the French gas and oil company, to extract from other fields that are not even in the disputed waters, that are not disputed anymore, if this signing happens this week, both in the Zionist colony and here in Lebanon on the final details. This will be the only hope for Lebanon to come out of its financial problems. There is no more international funding to come to Lebanon. As we see, all of it is being dumped into Ukraine, not only Lebanon, that's going to have to deal with the fact that there's no more funding for any regions in the world that are suffering from problems, because there's a lineup, and at the beginning of it are the newly accepted into whiteness, the Ukrainians, the Slavic people that were outside the whiteness for centuries, and suddenly now are included in there.
But my past guest, my comrade Dr. Mara Osman of Mini Stream, on Press TV, she was saying to me that that many Lebanese personally aren't in the mood to have these elections. That they would rather that that the government and the various bureaucracies and the sectarian misleadership class just get on with the business at trying to recover, trying to rebuild the country already as it is. That there's enough there's enough instability, there's enough discontent as it is with the fact that the country is still not fully recovered from the port blast. And she was saying that there already are ministers, and she says she even knows one of them, personally, the main minister, that's trying to get the ball rolling at at getting the country, rebuilding itself. That if you have the elections, and if that guy, doesn't keep his job for whatever reason, because there's a new minister of this there's a new minister over here, there's a new one over there, and then of course the new sectarian leaders over there, they want to install their own cronies and their own yes men. That basically the rebuilding efforts are back to square one. Do you share that? And on top of Israel is always a very thorny issue. Do we do business with them on this? Do we do business with them on that? Or do we stick to some form of a BDS and some kind of a non-aggression pact, while not recognizing anything of as you mentioned, the Zionist entity and the Zionist occupation? So are people yeah, your thoughts on all of that?
Well, look, the problem in Lebanon in terms of the sectarianism in politics are enshrined in the constitution that was put in by the French, and by the quote-unquote peace deal at the end of the Civil War that was brokered by the Saudis and the Saudi ambassador in the last week. This is called the Ta'if Agreement, which basically guarantees a maintenance of sectarian quotas that are following the census from 1942, okay? Because they don't want to even do a census in Lebanon, an official census, because if you make a new census, if the sectarian parliamentary quotas and position of the president is supposed to be Christian, because supposedly in 1942 the Christian sects or religion followers were the largest group in the country, and well, today actually the Shia are the largest group in the country. So if they do even a census, they want to continue to follow the sectarian constitution that the French put in, it will mean a Shia president. And so this is where we're at. Lebanon is a manufactured entity. It's as illegitimate in its existence as the Zionist colony, because Lebanon is just chopped off from Syria. Literally, Beirut is just the port of Damascus. It's like where, it's an hour drive if there's no border stop, so it's literally just the port of Damascus, and the way the French cut it is to cut off Damascus from reaching, having an easy out. Similarly, the Escandaron province that was given by the French in 1930 to Turkey. The Escandaron is basically the port of Aleppo. And again, you see, this is why the coastline of Syria is so squished. Point is, what I'm trying to say is that there is no possibility for Lebanon to have a non-sectarian, political scene without deleting Sykes Picot, the agreement in 1912-17 that the French and the British, wrote up and cut off all the parts of Greater Syria, or Bilad al-Sham, as we say in Arabic, into these pieces that are ungovernable or unable to be self-sustaining. Lebanon has 4 million civilians. How can it be a producer of anything. You see what I mean? It's a very small population. It's just a very small market. It has to be part of a bigger Syrian market to be able to compete on a global scale and be independent and so on. So that's the struggle when we talk about resistance to imperialism and colonialism in the region. Then it's not an issue about who's the minister, who or what. This is why I think Hezbollah have been very smart over the last 40 years, because there is no point really of fighting over the state apparatuses that are not going to produce anything in this context. It's very important for Hezbollah, and that's what they did, or any resistance movement that wants to decolonize anywhere in the world, is to build parallel structures that provide the basic social needs of the society, basic, okay, while resisting militarily to defeat the colonial powers and defeat the colonial arrangement that you're in. And then after that, we can talk about statehood and structures of statehood. There is no democracy under colonialism and occupation.
Quick follow-up question then. What do you say to some people? These are often secularists or people like myself who are only starting to know about Lebanon, and are ignorant of the history of colonialism, and we only get a very simplistic narrative about the Civil War, that it was just a bunch of religious people murdering each other left, right, and center, and then Israel massacres a bunch of Palestinians because of terrorist attacks and stuff like that. So what would you say to those, even those in Lebanon who are probably also ignorant of their country's history, because we also can never underestimate how ignorant people are over their own country's history. So what would you say to people from Christian communities and those who aren't supportive of Hezbollah, just as a democratically elected political party, like any political party across the spectrum? What would you say to those people who say we need to keep the current constitution? We should reform the current constitution, but we need to keep the current constitution because if a majority of Shia people or even Sunni people elect a Hezbollah or some other or the Sunni equivalent of Hezbollah, which is an extreme Sunni party, they're going to oppress the secularists, they're going to oppress the Christians and other, what would you say to those people?
Well, obviously, the Greater Syria region prior to World War I was one of the most cosmopolitan in terms of religious and sectarian diversity, the most secure and safe for any minority in the world at that time. The curse of Zionism that was brought in by the West, that created a Jewish state, a state based not only on supposed Judaism, but on a perversion of Judaism called Zionism, which preaches Jewish supremacy. This is a religion that is, a patrimony of the Arab people and their ancestors, Judaism. It's the religion of Moses of Egypt, who freed slaves that were a melange of Hamitic and Semitic captured peoples from the places that Egypt occupied and made war against, being his name and his religion, the religion of my ancestors, the true Semite myself, is being used to sell Jewish white supremacy, colonialism. Now that curse of Zionism They also added an added curse during that Sykes-Picot and creation of the Balfour Declaration in the same as a back page to the Sykes and Picot agreement, was the creation of another sectarian state called Lebanon under a Christian banner. And people must understand that the borders of what is Lebanon right now is exact to the borders of one of the Crusader states that the Crusaders created in the 1100s, okay? And then, of course, under the auspices of the British and the Americans, they created the Saudi state, a Muslim supremacist under the auspices of the Wahhabi cult state, okay? So here you have the West creating three fundamentalist sectarian states based on perversions of beautiful unitary religions that are supposed to bring people together. That's the message of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of them being the patrimony of the Arab people and their ancestors, being used to do the opposite. Okay, and this is where the struggle starts. So, yes, Lebanon is a sectarian situation, but once you put forward that proposition to the population here in Palestine, that you have to believe that there's a chosen people and that a God gave them the right to come from Europe and to slaughter you and steal your land, and your religion and your identity are all irrelevant, are fake, are subhuman. You, as the descendant of the real Jews, the original Jews, and the descendant of the real original Christians and the real original Muslims, you have to listen to the interpretation of white European man, a convert to Judaism, a convert to Christianity, a convert to Islam. And so, of course, the reaction naturally will be that the local population will have to assert its identities. What are you saying to them? You're saying that the interpretation of their beliefs in Islam and Christianity, the Christian Arabs, and what they believe in, is they have to admit that it's actually not true interpretation of Islam, Christianity, or Judaism. They have to admit to that interpretation, the perverted interpretation of Zionism. Of course, the reaction is going to be Muslim nationalism, Christian Arab nationalism. That's going to be the normal reaction. So people from the outside the region, if they can't understand the basics of this, they're going to have a hard time understanding why would a group like Hezbollah be birthed, come to reality, and why actually people would follow it, and why actually it's just that they do. They, as Arab, as Palestinian, as Lebanese, want to assert their interpretation on their own land. They're not going to Europe to tell people what to believe, what kind of Christianity to believe. Yeah. I mean, the Christian Europeans preached a genocidal version of Christianity for 600 years. Yes. Slaughtering indigenous peoples across the world, crusading 900 years. It actually starts from the first crusades. It's the millennia now that the Europeans have used perverted interpretations of Christianity and now Judaism to genocide peoples.
I had a follow up for that, but we're going to wait to return to that later because I actually do have a question to ask you about how the Middle East can unite and overcome themselves. That people don't feel that they have to choose between either the secularism dictated to them by the West or Shia nationalism, ultra Shia nationalism of a Hezbollah, or feeling that they have to choose between either Iran as a regional power or Saudi Arabia as a regional power. But before I ask you a question about that, let's talk. You already mentioned Palestine, so let's talk about Palestine, and then let's talk about the cancel culture campaign against you. And I wanted you to talk to us about your background. Now, did you grow up in occupied Palestine, and if so, what what were you an eyewitness to when it comes to the widely condemned apartheid of Israel and living under the boots of Israeli colonialism? Talk to us about that if you can.
Yeah, so I wasn't born in Palestine. I mean, my mother's side of the family, I swear I claim my Palestinian blood from my mother. Her family were expelled from Haifa on April 22nd, 1947, as all of Haifa city. And she was born as they reached the border in Bint Jbeil, Lebanon. And her family ended up, going through Lebanon to Syria and eventually to Jordan and getting citizenship there. My father's side of the family are Syrian, from Deir ez-Zor, Syria. So I am Palestinian and I am Syrian. I'm an Arab. I'm a Shami, a real Semite. By the way, this is where it's important for your viewers understand the word Semite. What does this mean, and why is it used as to be called the word anti-Semitism to define anti-Jewish behavior, which is
exactly.
And of course, Semite. The word Semite comes from the name Sham, Shim, Sam, one of the two sons of, in the mythological religious way, of the two sons of Noah, Prophet Noah, Sham and Ham, that survived the flood. And one of them, Sham or Shim or Sam in English, descended to Damascus, which we call in Arabic Sham, okay, and settled there, and his descendants settled Bilad al-Sham, the lands of Sham. Greater Syria in Arabic is called the lands of Sham. That includes Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, and Syria and Lebanon. And the other Ham went to North Africa, and that's what you get Hamitic peoples like, supposedly, again, the Amazigh people, okay? Yeah. So here we have me, I am, a Syrian, Palestinian, meaning I am a true Shamite, a true Semite, okay? Geographically, linguistically, I speak Semitic language, Arabic, Shami language again. And on the other side, you have European converts to Judaism, descendants of European converts to Judaism, who created Zionism, and to claim to themselves indigeneity, they purposefully inserted the word anti-Semitism to define them only. Hate, and also hate to Judaism, which is not an ethnic or a linguistic issue. Judaism is a religion. Somebody can be white, can be black, can be African, can be Amazigh, can be Ethiopian, can be Arab, who's a follower of Judaism, can be Iranian. And so when they use the word anti-Semitism, and why they insist on using the word anti-Semitism is to confuse people, because if they say anti-Jewishness and they're pointing at somebody criticizing Israel, everybody will be like, yeah, you're right. But when they start saying anti-Semitism, they want to claim indigeneity to Palestine and me resisting their colonial project and their urge to come and kill and genocide Palestinians and steal their lands becomes anti-Semitism, because that is rejecting their right as supposed indigenous to come and settle. This is why they insist to use the word anti-Semitism, and I personally reject it. I will say anti-Jewishness when somebody wants, spreads hate against people.
Yes, yes. I remember, I remember actually reading a definition of anti-Semitism long time ago when I was, self-educating myself about Israel-Palestine, and several of the definitions. I mean, one of the definitions is anti-Jewish hatred, but what would always come up was they would say, Semites are people from the Middle East, and they're Jewish, and they can be Arabic, and And when so and when we say when we even say that term, that ethnicity of Arab, well, you can be a Christian Arab, you can be a Muslim Arab of any kind, and you can be a Jewish Arab. So I always thought that was interesting, and I believe even members of the Nation of Islam, in the U.S., which is a whole different can of worms altogether. But when they would defend themselves against accusations of being anti-Semitic, they would say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute, we can't be anti-Semitic because because like the religion we believe in comes from the land of Semites, and those people are Arabic." Arab Muslims and stuff like that. And Dr. Mara Osman, twice when she was on my program, and she's somebody I actually consider a dear friend in the
Can
conference.
you imagine?
She was saying we can't be
Colonizing?
anti-Semitic because we are Semites.
Yes, we need to liberate
Yeah.
this language from Zionist occupation. They want to deny me as an Arab who belongs to the largest Semitic linguistic cultural group. By the way, there's no such thing as race. Linguistic cultural group, which is the Arabs, 600 million. We are to be denied using the term anti-Semitism to describe hate towards us.
Yes.
And it's the Jewish white colonist that is allowed to use that term.
Yeah.
So
but then I'm curious, what was the term then that was used for anti-Jewish hatred, which was institutional in the former imperial Russia? Well, even in the USSR, there was still anti-Jewish hatred. So what was the term that was even used to describe anti-Jewish racism that was in that was in Europe?
So
America.
this is a very interesting story, actually, and this is where it brings us back to white supremacy. Listen to this, okay? So of course, the Russian Empire occupies the north coast of the Black Sea and Crimea, and these areas were populated by Turkic people, the Tatars and other Turkic peoples. And the Russian Empire ethnically cleansed them all and kicked them out, towards, Central Asia. And in this process, they needed now colonists. So what did they do? The Russian Empire gives a privilege to Jewish, Slavic peoples from Ukraine and Poland to come and settle the south of what it became Ukraine. Okay, so and these areas started being called the Jewish plains of settlement. Okay, so this privilege now that was given to the Jewish Slavic settlement did two things. One is it triggered a racist reaction from the Christian Ukrainians, right, which led to the Jewish pogroms in Russian lands, because they were like, why are you giving these Jews the privilege? We as Christians should be the ones getting the right to ethnically cleanse and colonize. Okay? So that's one. It led to the pogroms. The second one is that it put a seed in the mind of these Jewish Slavic peoples that, what, we can get the same privilege as Christian white people and colonize, ethnically cleanse on behalf of an empire if we achieve get that imperial protection to do so. And that birthed Zionism. Zionism was birthed there.
In fact, a frequent guest on this program who actually confessed to his audience, and I'm often a member of his audience. Eve Engler, the brilliant Canadian historian and geocritic, media critic, anti-imperialist thinker. In his book, Canada and Israel Building Apartheid, I was very shocked that actually the earliest supporters of Zionism, at least in Canada, were actually Christian Zionists. These are the kind of batshit people, the fascists of of the United States, who believe that that when Judgment Day comes and
all right, so
that's
this is where the word anti-Semitism comes. So now, as this program happens, and as these Zionist ideas, because of the experiment of ethnically cleansing another Muslim people and taking their land, okay, that sparked it in the Jewish white settlers, the white supremacists that are Christian and secular, that are attacking the Jewish white people, started calling them Semites. Before that, they were being called, the hate is anti-Jewish hate. That's what it was being called. Suddenly, it started calling them Semites to infer that they don't belong to Germany, that they don't belong to Poland, that they don't belong to Russia or Ukraine, right? So those fascists that are not Jewish started calling them Semites in order to infer that they don't belong to, and the Zionists accepted that. They said, well, from this point on, hate towards Jews is anti-Semitism, and we don't belong to here. Let's go colonize Palestine.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So at the core of the battle to liberate the word Semitism, what is Semitism and what is anti-Semitism is it is something that goes to the basics of where all this problem started.
And when we talk, and so your family was part of the very early Palestinian diaspora, but then so that's that's just very fascinating in and of itself. And then so before we talk about the cancel, one last thing to talk about before we get into the cancel culture campaign against you is, we often hear, that in Israel, one of the reasons why there can never be peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians is that the Palestinians are mostly Muslims. Israel insists that it can be a Jewish-only state, and you can never, ever reconcile these two religious groups from two very different parts of the world, because Israel is basically a melting pot of North American and European Jewish diaspora who come to who come and build a settler colonial state in Palestine. What's often left out, so your response to that, because don't Palestinians who are Christians, Palestinians, I mean, you could be a Palestinian, I imagine, who's but Arabic, Middle Eastern, it doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or not. You're going to be discriminated in Israel, even if you're one of the few lucky, Druze or Israeli Arabs that live in, say, Tel Aviv or the unoccupied territories of Jerusalem, right?
So look, it's very important, Robin, number one, to remember that there was a huge Jewish population in the Arabic world before the creation of Israel. There wasn't a big Jewish population in Palestine specifically, but there was a big population in Iraq, in Morocco, in Egypt, and the Zionist, organizations collaborated with the king of Iraq and the king of Morocco and paid by head for every Iraqi or Jewish Iraqi or Jewish Moroccan that was expelled. The puppet vassal king of Iraq and the puppet vassal king of Morocco expelled them on their behalf to send them to Palestine. And the Egyptian puppet.
Whoa, wait, hold on a second. Wait, so the monarchs. So we're talking about like the monarchs that the Brits.
Yes, and the Brits and the French, after World War I, they have occupied every Arabic country, and they appointed vassals, right? In the Hashemites in Jordan and Iraq, the Alawis in Morocco, and those were puppets, right? These are vassals, and so on that one hand, there's those vessels that took money from the Zionists to expel Jewish Arabs. The other was there was a huge population in Egypt that was anti-Zionist Jewish population. Okay, and they refused. They're part and parcel this. So the Zionist organizations organized a terrorism campaign, blowing up the cinemas and the opera houses and the synagogues and the community centers of the Jewish community in Egypt to scare them and trigger a situation. So clearly,
wow, interesting.
Yeah. So the Arab Jewish population was pushed out into Palestine after 48. Of course, they represent something like almost half of the Jewish population in Israel. But they are not allowed, look, they're not allowed to be the leaders. You've never seen a Jewish Arab in Israel that is the Speaker of the House or the Prime Minister or the President. They're not allowed. Similarly, for Jewish Ethiopians were sterilized. They had their children stolen from them when they arrived on the plane and given to white families, Jewish white families. And the Jewish Yemenis, that happened to them too, sterilized and their children taken from them. This is why I, although it's easier to speak about the Zionist project and Israel as a Jewish supremacist state, as the Beit Salam, the largest Israeli quote-unquote human rights organization, said, Israel is an apartheid state built on and maintained through Jewish supremacy. Although it's easy to say that, a more accurate way is to say Jewish white supremacy. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Because of how it treats all the other Jewish followers of the Jewish religion from non-quote-unquote white backgrounds.
Go ahead.
And because, of course, it all the propaganda of Zionism reasserts European supremacy and how this Zionist project is going to be a beacon in the jungle, like Borrell would say, and so forth, right? So it asserts European civilizations constantly, speaking about how it's going to be a project that allows European power to be projected over the Arab peoples. So yeah, it's a Jewish white supremacist project. Zionism, that's what it is.
But even if you are a Palestinian of a Christian background, or a Palestinian that's secular,
that follows there's Palestinians that follow the faith of John the Baptist. Okay, it was called for the Arabs they call him Yahya, the prophet Yahya.
They'll still be discriminated against, and they'll still have like the boots of the occupier on their neck, like George Floyd, right?
Yes. It doesn't matter.
Because I think it's very important to emphasize that because way too many people depict Israel's occupation of Palestine and this seemingly inability to reconcile the two sides as it's just a religious conflict, and you have the Israeli Jewish extremists, and then you have the Palestinian Muslim Jewish extremists, completely forgetting that, well, the PLO and Fatah were secular, and constantly they had like olive branches to the occupiers, even saying, okay, look, you have the rest of historic Palestine, just give us the West Bank, give us Gaza, give us Jerusalem for statehood.
It reminds me of one of the tweets that I got attacked for. Okay, look, the solution is very simple, and it's the same offer as Palestinians were giving to the Zionists today. It's the same offer that Salah ad-Din gave to the Crusaders 1,000 years ago. Okay, you have three choices. One, accept equality. You can stay where you are. Take the land that you already stole and occupied and stay here, and all forgiven.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's choice one. Logical. Any person who's a humanist who actually thinks inequality will accept that. Choice number two: if you don't want to accept equality and you want to stay as a supremacist, you can steal everything that you can get your hand on, put it on a boat, on a plane, and leave with all of that, and nobody will stop you. And that's what the elite of the Crusaders did. They stole all the gold of the churches, they stole everything they can, put it on the boat, and left. And final choice, stay, refusing equality, and fight us for death.
Yeah.
There's no, so apparently, because the third choice is, if you don't want to give me equality, I'm going to fight you. Apparently, that makes you Jewish, anti-Semitic, as the Zionists would call. And so this is the solution now, and will not change any time. And the Zionists, what they're trying to achieve, the Crusaders couldn't achieve. The Romans couldn't achieve. They cannot. There will be an end to the Zionist colony coming very, very, very soon, actually. And, those of the colonists that want to stay with equality, they're welcome to stay. Those who don't, get the hell out of here.
All right, let's get to. All right, let's get to one of the reasons. Let's get to the second main reason why I wanted to talk to you, which is about the cancel culture campaign against you. So you were a student in Canada, and you were a student activist that tried to mobilize Palestine solidarity and also to push back against anti-Arab hatred, Islamophobia, and just broadly, I prefer the term a broad anti-Middle Eastern hatred which is prevalent in the West, right?
Yes, 20 years ago, I used to be at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. I was studying political science, and I was the first Arab to be elected to a student union executive in Canada. It was a great thing, but unfortunately, I had the misfortune that it was a few weeks before September 11, 2001. And the Zionists had already were on a campaign to attack me because I got elected. They had already, and the minute September 11 happened, they started calling me the Osama bin Laden of Canada. And the elected executive.
Really? They called you the they called you the Osama bin Laden of Canada.
Yes, this is how ridiculous. Look, the Zionists are pathological liars. They pathologically slander and libel and misrepresent people. They can't stop themselves. And when they see that they can do it and get blood for it, and they cannot be, pay any price for it, they'll do. So imagine this is the student union. I was the only Arab on the executive, and I'm just a VP internal. The executive president was a lesbian woman. 3 of the other executives were gay. There's 3 or 2 Jewish people in the executive, and
one of them was Aaron Monte, right?
No, that was the year after. But imagine this. This is the night of September 11. B'nai B'rith, the Zionist lobby organization here in Canada, live on press conference across, broadcasted on all the media in Canada, calls the Concordia Student Union the youth wing of Al-Qaeda in North America. Calls the agenda, the student agenda that was published by the student union, the manual of Al-Qaeda. Calls on the Canadian government to shut down the border for a demonstration that we had been organizing for Palestine that was supposed to commemorate the Sabra and Shatila massacre that is commemorated on the 14th of September. So this is, you can smile about it right now. I can laugh about it too. But at that moment, they were willing to take me to Guantanamo Bay if they can.
Yeah.
Okay? For daring, as a Palestinian Arab student, 19, 20-year-old, I don't even remember right now how old I was, for daring to run for elections openly supporting Palestinian rights.
Wow.
If they could have, they would have achieved it. I was under.
Well, you had a very hard right government at the time. Wasn't that the was that the early days of the Stephen Harper
This was just before Stephen Harper took in. It was the Jean Chrétien, the liberal government. But the Minister of Justice at the time was Erwin Cutler, who's the basically czar. He's the grand wizard of Zionism in Canadian politics.
Yes,
Okay?
yes.
He's behind.
We've talked about Kotler on the show, and he's also anyone who's interested in the whole Epstein human trafficking scandal, which has like the Israeli deep state, the American deep state, the British deep state, and all of the organized crime networks all over it. Yeah, Eve actually covered how Erwin Kotler was also part of it because he's very good friends with the ultra-Zionist scumbag Alan Dershowitz.
Oh yeah, and this is the circles. So this is how my beginnings of political organizing were a baptism of fire. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, my name was dragged then as it's been dragged today. Of course, there was no social media then.
Yes.
The libel is still the same. And I mean, my parents were really worried, obviously, at the time. I was, there was. Anyways, look, this followed the year after the Zionists because we continued to be in control of the student union. And when I mean we, I mean the activists working for the liberation of Palestine. And we were in control of many of the student unions in Canada, and it became a huge battle that the Zionists were bringing Netanyahu to Concordia on purpose.
Yes.
To prove that they, as Zionists, not only can control the territory of Palestine and exclude Palestinians' ability to move on that territory, they can come to Concordia University and do the same. Control the movement of Palestinian students there, shut them up, show them who is master.
Yeah.
That's the intention of bringing Netanyahu. Actually, the president of the university begged the media mogul that at that time that controlled 85% of the newspapers in Canada. His name was Israel Asper, the Asper dynasty. He was the one paying to bring Netanyahu to speak at Concordia University, and he was meeting with the president of the University of Concordia, saying to him, you have to have him speak there, because they want to prove that they can shut the Palestinians.
Yes.
And the president of the university begged Israel Asper, said the university will cover to rent the Place des Arts, the Opera House of Montreal, on the budget of the university, to please have Netanyahu there so we don't have a riot at the university. And Israel Asper said, if you do that, I'm going to cut all the funding to the university. And of course, the university acquiesces, and they have a segregated event where not one Arab, not one Muslim was given a ticket to go see supposedly an event by a prime minister at a public university. It's supposed to be open speech. So of course we shut him down. An achievement that hasn't been repeated.
Now a mutual friend of ours, Eve Engler. Now he got kicked out for that. I believe Aaron Mate. There's a huge documentary which I think focuses. Mr. Mate, if you're watching this, I'm not no offense, but it focuses, I think, way too much on Mate's story, not enough, I think, on Eve's story. I mean, Eve is actually completely invisible in this documentary, not your story or anything like that. So I think it would have been much more interesting if the documentary had kind of focused on, all of those. Anyways, but
so listen. What happened at Concordia over those 3, 4, 5 years was Palestinian organizing, okay, that got the left into power because the Palestinians brought a coalition of all the ethnic and cultural groups with the left, which will never get elected ever in the West, and the left without the left anywhere, not only at the student union level, without the support of the racialized populations and indigenous populations. But look at me. So here we have a Palestinian student uprising. It wasn't the Concordia Student Union that organized the demonstration against Netanyahu. It was the Palestinian students in all the campuses in Montreal, plus the Arabs and Muslim students who came with a few of the left and stood up for their own rights and refused to allow a war criminal to enter the sanctuary of the academic space of the university. He can go on and his freedom of speech is available on TV and in the parliaments where he's protected by other white supremacist structures, okay? So for the documentary to end up being, and this documentary is called Discordia, I believe.
Yeah, which I think focuses way too much on just
on two Jewish kids, two Jewish students, and one Palestinian student. So it ends up being about, even when Aaron is a great guy and so forth, it ends up being about the debate within Jewish heads. Okay, the event was an uplifting event, an uprising by the Palestinian Arab and Muslim students in Montreal, less than a year after September 11, when we were all living the, mass repression and fear, people disappearing, the FBI and CIA and Homeland Security disappearing thousands of people. And we had the courage to stand up for our rights, and then they make a documentary about Jewish feelings, without disrespect to Aaron.
And look, it's an important topic, and I think, as a person who actually covered Jeremy Corbyn when he was last leader of the Labour Party, I actually covered the Labour Party conference just before that general election. Jeremy Corbyn was still leader of the Labour Party, and I spent most of my time actually covering the Jewish anti-Zionist movement, in the Labour Party, which was basically, I mean, there was no other word to describe it. It was a civil war between the ultra Zionism, of those who continue to want, Israel to be to be the settler colonial state, which Britain protects, and those who actually wanted a true justice for the Palestinians, the Jewish anti-Zionists. And I spent a lot of time with many of the people who were slandered as anti-Semites, who the cancel culture said you need to cancel them. Ironically, these are the same people who talk about Je suis Charlie. So this is not the first time you've been canceled by the powers to be. So that's a segue into the current cancel culture against you. You've been this long, Palestine justice activist, and you are of Palestinian background, and yet the powers to be, they don't want to hear the legitimate grievances of those who are suffering from institutional racism when they do want to hear from us. So Black people, we have to approach the problems of racism like Dr. Cornel West or Martin Luther King Jr. We have to be very Gandhian. We have to be like Bob Marley. It's all about peace and love. We can never be like, Malcolm X. We can never be like Peter Tosh. We can never be like the Black Panther Party, what they call militant. And I think it's the exact same thing with Palestine, except the only difference is that you can be the most Gandhian person of the Palestine, you can be the most Gandhian Palestinian, but they still tell you to basically kindly, F off. And so you can never say, so it's already too much if you say that Israel, it's already too much if you say Zionism is like white supremacy, is like Turtle Island settler colonialism. So you can't say that. then you can't say things like Israel's an apartheid state. That's also, too much for them. And then, if the Palestinians supports the PLO, they're damned for that. If they support Hamas, they're damned for that. And now, even when the Palestinians still say we want a one-state solution, we want a democratic one-state solution, that way the Palestinian diaspora who were displaced can come back to historic Palestine. We're all equal. It doesn't matter whether you're Jewish. It doesn't matter whether you're non-Jewish or non-Muslim. But we want a one democratic state solution. The powers to be still say no to that. And even now, with the IHRA definition, which they're trying to shove down all of our throats, they want to even say, if you dare say that Israel was founded as a settler colonial state or a racist entity, and you have the nerve to compare Israel to settler colonialism of Turtle Island, Australia, New Zealand, or apartheid South Africa, you are an anti-Semite. Your response to your response to that.
Well, look, listen. The attacks on me stem not only from my tweets that use this very strong language.
In fact, sorry to interrupt. Let me just give a brief recap to people who may not know what we're talking about. But basically, you've been a long anti-racist Palestine solidarity activist, and you were part of some anti-Islamophobic group, which the government of Canada was going to give money to. Then they decide to withdraw it because they saw some tweets that you've done, some offensive tweets that you've done.
Yeah. To explain it a little bit more, I work as a consultant. My work is I'm an expert in broadcasting law, specializing in the rights of racialized, indigenous, and disability communities.
Yeah.
And so I work as a consultant at this group called the Community Media Advocacy Center that intervenes at broadcasting and television commissions, across the world, like the Canadian Radio and Television Commission, or in the United States, the federal and point is, every country has a commission that regulates broadcasting, gives licenses to radio and television, puts in the laws about. And over the last 7 years, this group, CMAC, has been very successful intervening at all these licenses of the major broadcasters in Canada, and intervening at any time the laws were being and policies were being rewritten to guarantee that the international treaties signed by Canada that govern the rights of racialized and indigenous people to broadcasting and the right to reflection and work and in those sectors, to guarantee that they are respected. And so we've been very successful. For instance, finally, after 30 years, 40 years almost, 30 years, the broadcasting law in Canada, 1991, says that every licensed broadcaster has to give equitable employment, equitable reflection in the programming, and access to the diversity of Canadian population. Meaning, the Canadian television stations have the population of Canada is 30 somewhat percent non-white, 7% Indigenous, then 7% of the employees of CBC, and 7% of its non-news programming is drama programming, should be, by law, reflective of Indigenous people and the jobs. Similarly for racialized people. So those laws are not respected, and CMAC was successful in putting studies of the employments and programming of all these companies and broadcasters, including CBC, the largest broadcaster in Canada, the government agency, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, for instance, last year was forced for the first time in a license condition to come into compliance with the law. By 2025, they have to have 30% of their employees non-white. And so this is what really is pissing off the Zionists, and with them the white supremacists in general, because
Cough, cough, the National Post, cough, cough, Post Media, cough, cough, Toronto Sun.
Yes, so they're freaked out because, you know, more employees that are Black, Arabic, Latino, Indigenous makes it harder for them to select compliant, a Black or a good Muslim that repeats the white supremacist lines that the government wants. Okay, the more, yes, they can hire a few Arabs and Black people and Latinos and Indigenous people to put them in front of the camera that will parrot oppressive behavior towards their own community. But how are they going to do that when they're going to have to hire thousands, right? So that's number one. So in the end, more rights for Indigenous and racialized peoples to have jobs and reflective programming that will lead eventually to more rights for Palestinians, then more speaking of Palestine and the rights, you know, of the liberation of Palestine. So they went into a frenzy to attack my tweets in order to reach their ultimate goal. Number one, they wanted IHRA definition, the nefarious, racist definition of anti-Semitism, quote unquote anti-Semitism of the IHRA, to be implemented at the Heritage Ministry of Canada, which funds all the cultural and arts projects in Canada, the Canada Council of Arts.
So in other words, the CBC, which is the PBS, that's the BBC of Canada. So the CBC would basically have to follow the IHRA definition, which basically means no criticizing Israel, period.
Yes, not from Heritage. This Heritage funding issue will affect actually all the Indigenous radio stations in Canada. Indigenous radio stations in Canada receive their funding from Heritage, Ministry of Heritage, okay? CBC receives its funding directly from the government, okay? So that doesn't, as a budget line. So they already achieved that. So Heritage right now froze all the funding, not only froze the funding of CMAC by the way, the contract that we had, just to make it very clear, after the killing of George Floyd, after the pulling out of the hundreds, discovery of hundreds of mass graves of Indigenous children in Canada, Heritage Canada outreach to CMAC, the group that I work for, the Community Media Advocacy Center, which is the global authority on these issues, and begged us to apply within 4 days to receive funding, okay, to create a series of conferences across the country that bring together racialized and Indigenous broadcasters, media producers, academics, to discuss a strategy for anti-racism in the media. The website is antiracism.media if anybody wants to see that. And we were shocked because there was no funding packages open for us to apply to, right?
Yeah.
So we applied anyways, and we got the money very fast, and we did all this work, half of it, all these events. So now the Heritage Canada has broke the contract and is asking for all the money back from CMAC, and we had already spent half of the money, of course, on more than half of the money on multiple, all the events and the speakers and their fees and the rooms and the food and the hotels, and they had suspended all the funding for all applicants across the country that already have funding, and opened an investigation, and they're going to investigate every person and every group that received funding from Heritage Canada on their Twitter and Facebook accounts and all their social media accounts to guarantee that none of them criticize Israel. And they will all have to sign a pledge, okay? Basically a pledge of allegiance to a foreign settler colony called Israel, that you will not criticize it. Added to it, just yesterday or the day before, Friday, there was a Heritage Committee of the Parliament met, and I just watched it a few hours ago. I just didn't know that they met, and they were, calling me names, all these MPs and the Minister of Heritage, defaming me, misrepresenting me, libeling me. And what it was revealed, and they had brought in the chair of the Canadian Radio and Television Commission, which is a tribunal that has the same powers as a superior court, that usually anyone can intervene on files in this court. Let's say there's the license of CBC, there's a new policy, you can intervene. This is a court. You can put in evidence, motions, and so forth, right? It's a superior court of the Canadian government. And we have been working as CMAC for 7 years on these files, as I explained to you. Well, they asked the chair of the CRTC, and he is now saying they are trying to investigate ways to ban Laith Marouf and CMAC from intervening on files. Every file that we intervened is on the record. Every file that we intervened had humongous effects, including the last one that they in this hearing they were attacking the minister because they funded this interventions, was on the implementation of the Accessibility Act of Canada for disabilities in the broadcasting sector, and that CMAC and my work, my filing, if it didn't go in there, not one in the indigenous and racialized communities would have been left out of the cross-sectional rights for their disability communities. So people that have disabilities that are indigenous and racialized would have zero rights within the broadcasting system of Canada, and their rights within the Accessibility Act that was passed by the Parliament wouldn't have been guaranteed. They want to stop us from intervening on these files like this. It means that they're destroying, forget the IHRA, they are going to usurp the right of Canadian citizens as a whole to intervene at the highest governing body that governs media and telecommunication in the country. They will have basically a list of undesirables. They will imagine, let's say, we were just talking about Aaron Cutler and his buddy Giuliani.
Alan Dershowitz.
Alan Dershowitz or Giuliani. Imagine, I don't like Alan Dershowitz and Giuliani, okay? But imagine Alan Dershowitz or Giuliani goes to court, and then the judge says, you know what, I'm not going to listen to anything to you because I don't like your speech outside my court. Not your filings. So our filings are CMAC, which are legitimate. My presentations at the CRTC, which are legitimate, will be excluded upon my speech on a social media platform that I'm already anyways erased from. So this is really draconian.
Well, it's it's so funny, and that's why I wanted your response. Although I think I know the answer because the answer is so obvious, but I just wanted your response.